How you doing? It's George at Wicked Warnings. I just want to show you guys and talk to you a little bit about how we did this SS5 light bar. It's called a Crosslink light bar by Diode Dynamics for this 2022 Gen 3 Raptor. Now this is a custom product that we modified here. Diode Dynamics doesn't sell it like this yet, but we were able to modify their 5 light Crosslink bar for an F150 standard. We added a 6th light to get it a little bit more wider. And we did a 2-color light bar with 4 middle white and the 2 outer edges in yellow. You could totally do 6 white or 6 yellow, whatever suited your preference. But we were able to modify that bracketry for the 5 light F-150 kit and make it fit the Ford Raptor. Now, we also did some C2 pods on the standard brackets above that. Those F-150 brackets fit fine on the Raptor. There's no problem. The C2 pods worked out just great. So you can see those are backlit in amber above that, pointed off on about a 45 to the edges for the ditches. And below that are our SS5 Pros. And what we did, because we ran clean out of auxiliary switches, was I added a waterproof momentary switch right over here. So the left side of the headlight. Now it's stuck on with just a simple little VHB. The wiring's tucked right behind the headlight, so it's easy to remove and easy to place underneath the hood or in the vehicle if you want it. I liked it here because it allows me to look at the light and adjust the backlighting, because you have to turn the backlighting on and off. So this switch interrupts the backlighting, which is fed obviously by the parking lights, but it gives me the ability to interrupt it and either kill it completely or adjust the backlighting. You can see all the different colors of backlighting here that Diode provides, so you can choose whatever you like the best. I'll go through them all here so you can kind of see. That's a really close match to this outer yellow. It's a little harder to see on film. That's a little bit darker than the outer yellow, and only because these are RGB white and this is yellow in the middle. So I'm kind of a fan. That's a nice blue. I'm a fan of the white there. That's what I like to leave it on, but we'll let the customer decide. And again, I put the switch here because we ran out of auxiliary switches. The one thing I will tell you too is if you're going to feed these backlights off of the parking circuit on a Raptor, I had no problem grabbing the parking circuit from the 2-wire connector that feeds these three grill lights. You'll find an 18-gauge wire, and I'm going to add in some clips in much more detail that I have of when I assembled this further in the video. So don't worry, there's a lot more info coming. There's a connector for this grill kit that has parking power, and that's where we grabbed it. However, you must diode isolate that. If you do not diode it, what I found was the RGB lights here would get Ford to shut down that circuit. It didn't really like it, especially when I started changing it. It seemed like whenever I turned the backlighting on and off, the circuit would get upset, I'm assuming from a backfeed spike, and it would turn it off. Ford would protect that parking circuit for this 3 grill lights here, which is also the same circuit for the outers here, and it would shut it down. So I put a diode in there to isolate it and protect it from any kind of a spike backfeed from when you're changing the colors, and I've had no problems since. Just make sure you're aware of that when you mount these SS5s with the backlights and you want to run them off of the factory parking switch. The C2s I didn't have any issue with. As I said, it was only the color changing that really messed with it. So it has something to do with the RGB white backlighting on the SS5 pods. Now here's kind of a final look of how the bracket ended up on the sides. Basically, we were able to utilize the adjustment in the outer bracket here and this bracket as well as here. We were able to basically tuck that light bar very tightly to the trim on the grill there. It ended up really nice in the radius. The other thing we had to do, which I'll show you in a further video, was adjust the center support because there's not room for the big long one that they give you. We wanted to keep these lights tucked in really tight. I didn't want to hang them out in the front pre-runner style. So I tucked them in really nice and tight, and I kind of made my own center support here out of the parts from their kit and some parts I had in the shop. As far as where did we line these up, I'm going to show you that right now as I look here. I'm going to turn on the flash and we'll look down. Okay, so what I did was these center 2 lights are exact square. I used the very first notch to give me an exact square for the center 2 lights, and that locked these 2 dead forward. All right, now I'm just going to shift you down a little bit and see what we did right here. Okay, next light down, we used the 1 notch inner. Okay, you can see here, this is the next light in the row, and we're simply in 1 more notch. There we go. Now the focus helps me out. So that's what we did with the next light in the row, and I'll take you down to the last light. I'm just going to move the camera here so you can see. I'm just shifting you down the row of lights. Alrighty, here in the last row, you can see here we used, it was meant to be the second notch right there to match up with the other side of this particular light. And on the outer light here, I went all the way to the third notch just to give this outer yellow light a little bit of a kick in. So that's how we ended up doing it. As you can see, I mimicked it on both sides of the light bar. And there's your straight down shot of how the angle here is. And it's pretty much about a finger angle here and about a finger angle right through here. And in the middle, it kind of follows the contour of the vehicle very nicely. How I wired it, I used the Crosslink kit for these 4. That's why the backlight's all tied together. All 4 of these white are tied together on heavy duty relay. I got the heavy duty harness for these 4. And on these outer 2, I just got a 2 outlet lighter duty harness, or no, it's still a heavy duty harness. It's the SS5 harness, but it's a 2 outlet instead of the big one for the 4 lights. And both of these two, the 4 in the center and the 2 outers, are relay driven, so the auxiliary switches on this Raptor can easily handle that. We mounted the relays underneath the hood, and that way we can cut open the harness a little bit or use the occluded adapter for diode to trigger those relays and off of the factory auxiliary switches on the Raptor. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about the ditch lights here. They mount up real easy. Just kind of fold back this rubber, follow the diode instructions, bolts in no problem, run the wiring back and underneath the hood right to the auxiliary switches. These little C2 pods, you can either choose to get a 2 outlet relay driven harness if you like, or you could create your own harness. Either way will work. The 2 outlet harness is probably the easiest way to go. And again, just tie it right into the auxiliary switches, and there was nothing hard about that at all. Now, the other thing I'd like to mention is out back here, we went with an SS3 pod. I like the SS3 back here. Seems to just fill it out and fit a little better. Also gives you a little bit more power. And if you wanted the backlit SS3, you could get that in red if you want. We didn't go with that option here. We didn't want to add any more red to the rear. Didn't find a need for that. But we did like to mount that SS3 pod right there with the factory bolt right there on the hitch. We backed out that factory Torx bolt, and we then replaced it with a longer bolt, but you didn't necessarily have to do that. We did. We replaced it with a longer bolt only because it made it easy to put a ratcheting wrench in there and tighten down the bolt. So it's a little difficult. You can't really get to the outer stud here to tighten these. So we had to set that bracket at about 90, snug it up really good with the inner hardware right there. And then we used a replacement bolt in here with a ratcheting wrench, and we're able to ratchet that bolt nice and tight, center up this light right here, and you could, if you want to manhandle it, you can move it up or down a little bit, I'm sure. We didn't completely break them off so tight here, but you know, it's in place and it's snug, and it's a flood lens, so it's going to light up everything back here just fine the way it is. We liked that mount. I like how it looks. When you back up here on the truck, it just seems fitting, looks appropriate, and it's tucked in nicely too, so it should have a damage-free life back there on the bumper. Now, we did a ton of other emergency work to this build. I'm going to do in another video. This is kind of just focusing solely on the details around the diode dynamics portion of this, because I know a lot of people are going to be very interested in that front Crosslink light bar and how we did it and whether we can supply it or not. So that is what this video is all about. I'm going to add in a bunch of build details now throughout the process, little video snippets and photos to try to give you guys as much information as I can, specifically on the off-road lighting on this Raptor. If you're interested in the emergency portion, check out the next video I'm going to film. It's going to be all about the emergency light portion that we added into this Raptor. And that's just a quick example of what I'm talking about. Of course, this Raptor does work a little bit in construction, so we did a lot more than just the off-road lighting. As you can see, we really hope that this guy is really set up for whatever might come his way. We've got lighting forward, lighting backward, extra heavy-duty white lighting, as well as a bunch of emergency. Thanks again for watching Wicked Warnings. I hope you liked our custom creation here with this Ford Raptor in regards to the diode dynamics stuff. We really like these diode dynamics lights. We're going to be using more of them. And if you have any questions, give us a holler back. We are a direct dealer for Diode Dynamics. You'll find us on their website. You'll find their products right here in our shop in Naperville, Illinois. You'll find them on our website as well. And if there's any products that you don't happen to see by Diode Dynamics, but you want, no problem. Just email us. We'll get them for you. If you want a little different light on the front, no problem. We can handle that. So I got the front of the Raptor all taken apart. We've exposed the bumper here. The screws and the bolts are a little different. However, it still has 3 nice bumper retainer plate bolts right up on top. So I think we're going to try to make that bracket work. We're probably going to take off some of this rubber to allow the bracket. I did some quick measuring, and it looks like this is my center, and the feet on the bracket would end up at these 2 points if I measured out right. So we'll see if we can get it close and see how this 6-head SS5 light bar turns out on this 2022 Raptor. Alrighty, there we have it. I got it mocked up, and surprisingly, the measurements that I got on the website for a 6-head bar, where the bolts would be right down there, and I transferred them up to the bumper, and it works out pretty nice. It looks like what I'm going to have to do here is hammer that curve out of this. I'm going to hammer that straight because the bumper's straight on the Raptor, and that hole's going to work. I'm going to need to drill a new one. Looks like right about in the D. Looks to me like it's going to line up real nicely with this bolt when I hammer that flange straight. And then I might have to put a spacer behind it here because we got a 3/16 piece of steel there. So these are the 2 bolts I'm going to go for. Put that bracket out into here. Try to maintain my center. And we should be able to put that 6 light SS5. Alrighty, here we go. We got the bar installed. Had a rookie mistake. Actually had the brackets on backwards. I figured the logo would have went forward, but it does not. The screws go forward, as you can see. And I got somewhat of an arc going. We're going to have to double check that up against the truck when we get the final brackets on, but that's the goal, is to get that on the front of this truck. All right, so I'm getting a little further here. This is how the bracket looks straight. We straightened it out. We put in 1 bolt. You can see here I've marked with my silver pen where I'm going to trim that rubber. Okay, I still need to drill the other bolt there. So once I took this out, I took that other bolt out and I marked it right there. So I'm gonna have to get this bracket back and figure out exactly where that bolt is in relation to this bolt, take a measurement, translate it to the bracket, drill a new hole in the bracket, and then this one will go here. Now my guesstimate marks right here, and when I laid the light bar up, I actually kind of want to fall right on the inside here. So your bearing, when you're doing a light bar this big, see this outer bolt? Your feet are actually going to end up kind of right about here. I'm a little wide on my mark. So our target for this right here is going to be somewhere right around in here, which you can see when we line up this. We're going to fall right about there. We're going to have a little bit of adjustment. The cool part about these light bars is, man, that you've got a lot of adjustment. So it's not a big deal if you're off a tiny bit. So here we go. Let's get a little further. Alrighty, so I got my harness kind of figured out and laid out here. I went with a heavy-duty 2-outlet harness on the yellow, and then I went with the linkable on the middle. So we're going to have 2 switches, one that lights the 4 white and one that lights the outer yellow. That's just how I did it. You do harness any way you want. Wired it all back together here. I'm going to attempt this to go in kind of next to the bracket here after a final adjustment. Now from Diode, they have this thing set up to mount pretty far out, and they provide you with this adjustable bracket. I'm going to actually, I believe, tuck this light bar in as tight as I can. So I'm going to use this bracket like this, and then I'm just going to fabricate some kind of a little L bracket for that snubber so it sits actually right there on the bumper. And I'm going to attempt to get these nice and tucked in back kind of tight to the grill. I don't want them hanging out all in the front pre-runner style if I can help it. So that's you get a lot of adjustment here, obviously, but I'm going to try to put it tight against the grill. The nut just fell off on me. Alrighty, so that's where we're at right now. Oh, and I ran my wiring all down here. I kept it really low. I'm going to go underneath here. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with anything. We're doing some other stuff here. Don't worry about that. And then I ran it right up back here, and it's coming up into the engine bay right here, where we're going to have our 2 relay harnesses fed off of our auxiliary. I may or may not shorten some of these wires, or I might just coil them. I'll probably end up shortening them and tailor fitting this harness to this truck, just to have as little wire length as possible. I can make seam out a lot of that wire and make a quality connection and just shorten these harnesses. So less wire, less resistance, less load, easier on the truck. So that's what I'll end up doing is deleting a lot of that extra length on the harnesses, but that's where we're at.